That takes us to the fifth hire. Maybe your favorite topic. You let me get on a bully pulpit, recently. Billing is the bane of most lawyers' existence. We just sit on hundreds of thousands of dollars of accounts receivable that we don't send invoices for, or we don't track properly, or, we're just like, we blame it on Clio. I tell the story about like part-time hire. I used to have this girl that would come in on Saturdays and help me do billing, and how terribly it went. And I don't really know how to explain why, Moshe, but we are so bad at sending out
I can explain
invoices.
I can explain it.
Yeah, I can explain how, but why. So if you have a good theory on why.
No, I can explain why. It's very simple, and we'll get to that in just a second, but I want to share a story because this is like one of the early clients that I had serving the legal industry. I was engaged by an attorney, quite successful, 9 people on staff, $2 million in revenue. And the reason I was brought in is I'm a profit first professional, and she had earned a profit of $50,000 on a $2 million business. And if you think about that, it's like, okay, if I sneeze the wrong way, I'm losing money instead of making money, right? Like, and where I'm saying a healthy business should be 35 to 50%. I mean, 50% is $1 million in profit. 35% is what, $700 in profit on the $2 million business. So somewhere between 700,000 and $1 million is where her profit should have been, and she was at 50,000. So big glaring problem, right? Dove into the business model and try to figure out like what's going on, and very quickly came to discover that she had an accounts receivable of $750,000.
Exactly.
$750,000. Like, if you solve this one problem, you're 3/4 of the way there
to be a millionaire.
There's nothing broken. There's nothing broken with your business. There's something broken with the practice that you have of how you're either vetting your clients to make sure that they're going to be able to pay you, or how you're collecting from your clients, right? Why are attorneys so bad at this? And it's not attorneys, by the way. Every business owner is bad at this. My landscaper mails me an invoice. It's great. He does invoicing. But I never hear a peep from him. Hey, how come this wasn't paid? Now, I try to be proactive and pay them on time, but I happen to know that I have an invoice from last year that's not paid because I had a question about it. And I reached out and I said, hey, I think you double charged me for my fall cleanup. Can you explain this? Never got a call back. It's a $700 invoice. It's just sitting out there. I'm happy to pay it if I owe it, but I haven't heard back from him. And business owners are like that because getting money from a client is felt as a friction relationship. It's like, I'm trying to ask you for something that you don't want to do. So therefore, it's going to be a conversation that's tough. And I also expect that when I ask you to pay a bill, you're probably going to tell me why I don't deserve that bill, because you don't think I should have charged that much, or why am I nickel and diming you, or that shouldn't have been charged because that was my fault. So I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to even pick up the phone and call you because I don't want to have that conversation. And I'm just going to let it sit there and hope that eventually you just decide to pay the bill. And that's what we do in the role of owning the billing process. One of the key things that happens when you hand that off to somebody else is you're removing the emotional part of it, because the billing clerk could care less. They don't have a relationship with the client. They don't have answers to any questions the client has. All they know is you have an outstanding invoice and I'm calling you to collect it, make payment arrangements, whatever it is. Now, if you have questions that you feel something is unfair or wrong or whatever, great. Let me take that information and then let me see if I can get a call back from the attorney, or let me see if I can get answers for you, right? So there's that middleman in between to kind of remove the friction from that conversation and allow it to go smoothly. The other piece of the puzzle is retainer replenishments. And that's the biggest problem, right? Because when you start with a client, assuming you're hourly billing, if you're flat fee, then it's a different conversation. But if you're hourly billing, when you start with a client, you put them on retainer. You take $5,000, right? Or $10,000, whatever the number is. And there's a clause in your agreement that says when it drops below X, you need to replenish it, right? You go and bill all your invoices against that retainer. So the first 5,000, 10,000 is the easy money, right? I'm not worried about getting that money because I got it coming out of retainer. The problem is that we don't have a good mechanism of knowing that the retainer is getting depleted. B, we don't have a system to go after clients and ask them to replenish it. Or C, we play mind games with ourselves saying they're near completion. I'm not going to ask them to top it off because we're almost done. All of those things are happening, and they usually happen in tandem. They go hand in hand. Often when I'm dealing with a client who's having accounts receivable issues, the real issue is the retainer replenishment. Because if you would simply be on top of that and make sure that your clients replenish their retainer, then the invoices would get paid because you're just pulling them, and you would have no problem. And the other, the mid-month billing is also a problem, right? So the cycle, for some reason, and this is another pet peeve of mine, and something a billing clerk will solve easily. For some reason, the legal industry has this habit of billing clients once a month. What other business do you know of that bills their clients once a month? It's unheard of. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. You do work for a client, you bill them. Like, why are you holding on to it for an entire month? Why is there the need to be this process that you go through once a month to batch all the bills and send them out to the clients and move? That should be happening weekly, if not daily. When you have a clerk that can do that, that can happen. It's no longer your time that's being tied up doing it. And that will allow you to find out that somebody is mid-month and they've used up their retainer, because when you're actively working on a client, they can run out, that money can run out quickly, and you can end up with a surprise at the end of the month, a surprise to the client and a surprise to you, because all of a sudden you're not getting paid for that invoice. So I agree with you, Brett, 1,000%. I actually would even argue that the billing clerk might need to go before some of the other roles that you listed, if collections is an issue for your firm. Because if you've got an accounts receivable that's more than 90 days, that billing clerk needs to be in place before you try to get more clients, because you're wasting your time serving clients and not getting paid.
So one of the things I talk about is your executive assistant, your first hire, is going to wear a lot of hats, and they can help with a little bit of the collections early on. They can do some of the email, and then you're almost like getting that person as an assistant, right? Because they can answer the phones. Again, that when you have one person, you need them to do a lot of things. So, but I agree that a billing could be moved up, right? Part of the argument, though, that we make is that you do have some help with collections, but then as you're ramping up with marketing and picking up new cases, there's this like 6-month window where, you're going to realize quickly, like, oh shit, I really need billing help, and I'm getting behind on my collections. What you just articulated to just like float out of you because you care about it so much is basically 15 pages in my book, right? I go through about 4 challenges that we face in billing. One is capturing time in the first place, because that sucks, right? Then 2, you get like sending out the invoices, it's time, and you got to review the time entries and all that. So then you get behind, or you get a big bill like you were just saying. So then you don't want to send it because you feel bad. And then the client then gives you a hard time sometimes. So like all these things compound on each other, and it's uncomfortable, and then we don't do it. And so, the amount of AR, like I usually say about 100,000, 150,000, but I may be short. Like you just used a $700,000 example. Most firms have anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 just sitting around, right? That is just free. You've already done the work. Just go collect it. But then the billing assistant is going to help you avoid that in the future, and they're going to know when to contact people to replenish those retainers, because you're going to put in those systems. You're going to put in the time ticklers, and you're going to send out biweekly billing. They're going to have those conversations for you. Like my law firm's financial team is 5 people. 3 of them are offshore doing all of the billing and the time entries, working with the attorneys, but from all through the part of the process, and then helping collect in a nice way. But imagine a lawyer who's so busy and they're picking up new cases, like, hold on, I got to call someone to answer a question about a bill. That's the problem with your landscaper, right? They're so busy going to their next job, they don't really want to explain to you or go investigate if it really was double charged. And it's this huge, painful thing that takes time. Again, time is so important because you have to manage your energy. We just won't have enough energy to do the whole billing system. So if you get a billing assistant or 2 in place and you put together what you just said, Moshe, I mean, your life will be so much better. You'll be profitable. You'll be happy. I share your passion with just how important that is for a law firm.